There have been many debates on whether or not the border states should secede. The border states should secede due to their economical differences from the North. The North and South are too different to work together as a nation. The election of 1860 is an example of how the North and South cannot work together to divide the power for the nation. The North and South's independent views on slavery led to the breakout of violence. It would be difficult to stay with the Union under these conditions. Firstly, the border states should secede from the Union due to their economic differences. The North is dependent on manufacturing, and they use machinery to produce and transport goods. Their major economic occupation is working at factories, for example, textile factories. On the other hand, the South believes that their workers are not taken care of. The industrial workers are paid low wages and are forced to work in hazardous environments. However, the South is economically dependent on their production of cotton and transporting their goods using ships. They are also heavily dependent on their slaves. The North believes that their slaves are mistreated inhumanely, though the South believes that the slaves are essential. The map, Railroads in 1860, presented in Document 1, shows that most railroads are in the North and that very few are in the South. This shows that the North is more technologically advanced. But in another map, slave density and cotton production in 1860, shown in Document 1, shows that slave population is heavily dependent in the South. This proves that the South needs their slaves in order to make profit. In Freedom and Crisis, An American History by Alan Weinstein and R. Jackson Wilson, it is shown that the North is more populated, with industrial workers being 92%. This emphasizes that the North is more industrial. Also in Freedom and Crisis in American History, it shows that the South has 100% cotton production, emphasizing that the South is dependent on cotton economically. The North is dependent on industry, while the South is dependent on their production of cotton. This is one reason why the border states should secede from the Union. Secondly, not only do the North and South have economical differences, but they are also affected differently from the election of 1860. The election of 1860 was between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas. It started off as 7 debates having to do with the issue of slavery. Abraham Lincoln is a Republican who didn't believe in slavery and wanted to abolish it. He believed that the majority should not have the power to deny a minority to their rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. On the other hand, Stephen A. Douglas was a Democrat who believed in slavery, popular sovereignty, and that the majority of people in a state or territory could rule as they wish. Although both were full of great ideas, Stephen A. Douglas won the debates. Followed by the series of debates was the election. Lincoln and Douglas were both running, but Lincoln's name did not appear on the ballot. This infuriated the South, and they thought it was unfair. They did not want to have a president that they didn't even know was running in the election. In Document 2, the map of the election of 1860, it shows how Lincoln won with 180 electoral votes, and those were not from the South, but from the North. The map demonstrates how the South's votes did not count in the election. This was the last straw. So, South Carolina decides they want to become the first state to secede from the Union. Immediately afterwards, a series of other southern states decided to secede. The election of 1860 was not fair to the South because they had a president who was against slavery and who they didn't know was running. This led to the issue where slavery initiated violence. Lastly, the North and the South have very different views on slavery. The North believes that slavery is morally wrong and that slaves should have their freedom. They think that the South mistreats their slaves. On the other hand, the South views their slaves as just property and another tool to help out in the cotton field. They think that the North are the ones mistreating their workers. In Cannibals All, by George Fitzhugh, a Southern socialist, it says, "The Negro slaves of the South are the happiest and in some sense the freest people in the world." This shows the Southern views on slaves. The North views slaves as if they were imprisonment and that they would do anything to free them. John Brown took that in his own hands. He planned a raid against Southern men to free slaves at Harper Ferry, Virginia. Brown led 18 men, black and white, to steal arsenals and start an uprising. Due to these actions, Southerners were terrified that there were more men out there like him. In The Americans by Gerald Denzetterall, It says, the response was equally extreme in the South, where outraged mobs assaulted whites who were suspected of holding anti-slavery views. In the North, there could be more men like John Brown. The views of slavery are too different to be working together with the Union. There could be more violence if the border states stay with the Union. The border states should secede from the Union. If they would secede from the Union, the border states could keep their slaves. They could continue using cotton as their economical profits. Lastly, they would not have to worry about who won the presidency because the victor would be shown on their ballots. These are reasons why the border states should secede from the Union.